All right, we are at 2:03, and we have a good amount of people attending and more logging in, so I will get started. Hello, I'm Jeremy Johnson, the Vice President of Customer Experience for Project 202. Today, we're happy to present this experience-driven leadership webinar on something that's near and dear to my heart, anticipating customer behavior during rapid change. As I'm sure you've heard, and according to a number of studies, customers and employees have permanently changed their behavior since the pandemic started, which is why we're calling this webinar series Evolving Experiences. Today, we're going to be talking about reimagining products and services to meet customer expectations and how we can build on rapid change to elevate customer and employee experiences to the next level. If this is your first webinar with us, we just want to make sure you're aware. We love questions from you, the audience, so please don't be shy. If you're using Zoom for the first time, which I know is probably not likely since I feel like we're on video conferencing 8 hours a day now, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And this is where you can ask questions, you can upvote them, and our moderator will be using these during the panel to ask questions to the panelists. So to kick things off, I'm going to introduce you to our moderator, Eric Atkinson, a leader in customer insights and delivering successful software and hardware products for global brands. And he is currently the Director of Strategy and Insights out of the Project 202 Seattle office. And so with that, Eric, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And thank you to the panelists who are joining us today and also for everyone attending. Before we get into the discussion, I did want to just set a little context here and begin to level set on what we'll be talking about and the great introduction that Jeremy provided. One of the strategic principles of the XD Leadership Alliance is to drive strategy through understanding your customers. And so Chris, if you could go to the next slide, please. Driving strategy with deep customer insights. And then during this time specifically, time of rapid change, crises, recession, economic downturn, beginning to think about how not only do we survive during these times, but also how we thrive during these times. And so Chris, next slide, please. And so in the spirit of Sankofa and what's past as prologue, thought we could examine a Harvard Business Review study and use a business lens to frame today's conversation. HRB conducted a year-long study to analyze strategy selection and corporate performance during 3 past global recessions: the 1980 crisis, the 1990 slowdown, and then the economic downturn around 2000 and the 2000 bust. They studied approximately 5,000 companies in the S&P 500, analyzing 3 periods: 3 years before the recession years themselves, and then 3 years after. And their findings were startling. And at the time of the writing of the report, they have found that 80% of companies had not yet regained their pre-recession growth rates. That's for sales and profits, even 3 years after the recession. And only a small number of companies, roughly 9% or so, flourished after the slowdown, doing better than they had before the recession and outperforming their rivals. And so the stats that you're looking at here, 17% of those companies did not survive the recession. They were either went through bankruptcy or acquired or became private. And then 85% of those companies where they were growth leaders going into the recession were toppled by their competitors and lost that market leadership. And so then we asked the question, so who were the winners, you may ask, and what strategies did they employ to ensure that they not only survive through the recession, but also thrive afterward? And then how might we emulate them, right? And what strategies can we take on ourselves? As you see here, the highest probability of flourishing after the recession was around 37%, but these were seen by companies who reduced cost selectively, focusing more on operational efficiency than their rivals did, as well as they invested relatively comprehensively in the future by spending on marketing, research, and development. Next slide, please. And so companies that master the strategic balance between cutting costs to survive today and then investing to grow for tomorrow do well after the recession. And the study found that there were 4 types of company management approaches during past economic downturns. And they were prevention-focused, promotion-focused, and then pragmatic companies and progressive companies. I'm not going to go into great detail about what each of those mean. You can see them on the slide, but just to touch on each one really quickly. Prevention companies, leadership mostly swings into crisis mode and survival mode. They believe that it's their sole responsibility to prevent the company from getting badly hurt or going under. Executives and employees approach every decision through kind of a loss minimizing lens. The organization aims low and keeps innovation incremental, and they try to do the same with less, resulting in lower quality and a drop in customer satisfaction. For promotion companies, those leaders in those companies aggressively pursue opportunity even in the face of adversity, and I think we all know about this theory. They develop a culture of optimism that leads them to deny the gravity of the crisis and ignore early warning signs such as customers' budget cuts. Oftentimes, it's a belief in blind innovation, adding bells and whistles to products and services that aren't really valued by their customers. And then we have pragmatic and progressive companies, which we'll focus on. These companies recognize that cost cutting is necessary to survive a recession, that investment is equally essential for growth, and that they must manage both at the same time. So I summarized that very quickly, and it may sound pretty easy, right? But it's not quite. These companies typically combine 3 defensive approaches and 3 offensive moves as well. Next slide, please. And so the companies that focus simultaneously on increasing operational efficiency, that's getting better at what they do, maybe restructuring, maybe leveling up capabilities and competencies and skills. And then also companies that invest a little bit in assets and new markets through research and development show the strongest performance on average in growth after a recession. Specifically, companies develop new business opportunities by making significantly greater investments than their rivals do in research and development and marketing. They also cut costs mainly by improving operational efficiency rather than slashing their labor force. And you can see some of the details there in the charts below. Lastly, progressive companies stay closely connected to customer needs, and that leads us into today's discussion. Like past recessions, leaders admit that the current crisis also marks an inflection point. The world is unlikely to resemble the one that we knew before the pandemic. Companies are grappling with how to deliver innovation in ways that support our humanity and rethinking products and services. But this presents a great opportunity for the customer experience design, and research community. The essence of our craft uniquely positions us to connect people, products, and the organizations that serve and employ them. And to help us answer how might we be multipliers of insight and strategy that anticipates behavior, strengthens relationships with our customers, and enables our teams and organizations in new and creative ways. Let's now have the panelists introduce themselves from on the screen, left to right, and jump into the conversation.
Hey there, thanks, Eric. Hi, I'm Erin Carouse. I'm the VP of Business Transformation and Customer Experience at Dell. I've been at Dell many years and have had a variety of user experience and design roles throughout the company.
I'm Amy Newman. I work at Autodesk. I've been here about 10 years. I'm a senior director in the experience design group for the largest product division. I run a research organization as well as a design organization that supports the entire AutoCAD business.
Hi, my name is Joyce Paul. I wear many hats. I'm an anthropologist, performing artist, and this and that. And right now, the hat I'm wearing is that of a research lead for Power Automate at Microsoft.
Hi, I'm Ashley Wally. I'm the VP of Product at Discussio. We're a smart video platform for businesses that are trying to bring structure and security into their conversations to help make insights and tracking things a lot easier. So we primarily work with market research and CX companies. And I've been here about 3 years leading product design, engineering, and research efforts here.
Thank you all so much. So just to jump in, following on with the initial context, what challenges do you see, and anyone here, feel free to answer, what challenges do you see as we try to connect with customers now during the pandemic and into the near future?
Hey, Eric, I'll kick it off. You know, I think one thing that we've learned is traditional communications and modes of operations is not really going to cut it right now. Customers' value sets have changed and are changing. Their priorities certainly have as well as they think through not only their business outcomes, but they're also trying to grapple with how their employees are doing. We have to make sure that we have relevant communications that helps them solve the strain of COVID in their environment, and that might be unique to that given customer. Our own experiences within Dell with investment in flexible work has helped us actually enable and help our customers in their journey as well.
I'll build on that and just add that I think there's also a change in the cadence of how we have to talk to people and how actively and creatively we need to engage, whether it's at the customer level, user level, during research or otherwise. I mean, people's attentions are split. Difficult challenges with children in the home and multiple stakeholders with different priorities are pushing the envelope for how we need to engage. So we're finding at Autodesk, we need to have a different level of empathy to understand what's happening and that there is a variety of experiences and things are much more creative about how we engage, much more interaction and engagement in smaller chunks of information.
Yeah, and I can add a little bit, slightly different viewpoint. Our entire worldview has changed. You know, the way we view personal hygiene, the way we view health, how we engage with communities, what we think was a healthy lifestyle before is no longer the same, how we communicate with our friends and families, everything has changed. And as a researcher, I feel like I have had to give up on some of the ideas that I have clung to in the past. You know, I would say something like, oh, I have 25 years of experience. This is how people behave. They may say this, attitudinal versus behavior. And I think I've had to actually rethink my own assumptions about my experience and what I think about user behavior. So not clinging to our so-called experience of the last 2 decades and being open. I think that's going to be one of the most challenging things for researchers and design leadership. Most of the accumulated knowledge from the past just may not be relevant anymore going forward.
I would build on that as well. I'm lucky in that I can bring the perspective of, you know, doing research with my customers, but then my product helps people connect with their customers. So, and I hear that all the time right now, Joyce, is that people are saying we cannot trust what we used to know about our customers. And even to the point where, you know, we work with a lot of multinational brands and a lot of CPG companies and things, and who really invest in getting to know their customers. And we hear some of them even saying, we want to separate our data, our pre-COVID data from our COVID data, and then we're going to want to separate that from the post-COVID data that we gather. Because they're recognizing it's such a fundamental shift in the way that people are making decisions and the things that they're taking into account, and the values and priorities have changed so dramatically that they almost don't even want to muddy what they are learning right now with what they used to know, which I think is frankly very extraordinary to be in a position where you say we have this vast knowledge of our customer that maybe is no longer relevant.
Yeah,
that's great. And so building on the past or the previous question and looking at some of the data that are presented initially during the intro, with businesses facing that uncertainty, how do you address the sentiment? Now is not the time that we should invest. We need to wait and see how this plays out. Let's hold pat with maybe what we're doing now and hope for the best.
On this one, I would say, understanding your individual customer's situation at the right level of depth is critical. Listening to them and really understanding why they may feel that way. One thing that's helped us at Dell is providing case studies of other customers with perhaps similar circumstances or IT environments or whatever the right denominator is to help build a bridge between what that customer might be experiencing and something that you can say, we've seen that. Here's how this, this solution is working well for a customer similar to you. That is one helpful thing we've done.
The other thing I'll add, I also think that the pace of change of the world around technology and the innovations that are happening is still at an accelerated pace, and things like COVID might even be accelerating some of that technology even faster. And so I think it's imperative that businesses like ours and those on the phone, that we are looking ahead to the kinds of transformations we need to invest in so that we can be resilient when changes happen. I think what we've learned is that we don't know exactly how things are going to go. And I feel that people are starting to shift into this sort of marathon from the sprint kind of thinking. And so we are starting to engage at a different level now, asking these questions around what are the investments that are really important. At Autodesk, we've had some transformations over the recent years, a business model transformation to subscription from perpetual, and the data transformations that are happening around us. All of those things are both helping us in the current climate and also reinforcing strategic direction that might be necessary to continue to pursue moving forward.
I think what we saw when everything sort of started to shut down around February and March timeframe is we saw a lot of people kind of hit the brakes and go, I don't know what's happening right now, and we definitely saw kind of a pause in research and a pause in just trying to get their own, ways of working under control, because so many people were shifting to a new work style. And then we saw it just go through the roof of companies saying, we've got to go start talking to people. And that empathy building being so important. And I think where we are at this point is saying, hey, if you're not doing this, you are really being left behind right now, because all of the other companies are recognizing that they need to go out and get inside people's heads. And, we tried to do that by doing some studies ourselves of just showing kind of the pulse of people's understanding of where the pandemic was and how they were feeling in their communities and how they felt like it was being handled in their local environments and things. And that, along with a number of other companies doing similar things, sort of started to show, the way people would have answered this question a year ago is very different than how they're answering it now, and kind of reinforces the idea that we need to go back and start listening again.
That's great. Building on that answer, and thank you, Amy, and Ashley, what should businesses be investing in now to leapfrog their competition, to get closer to their customers and understand their needs better, and then also to address the emotional support of their teams and employees?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I would say is that, companies and product managers, we have to be looking at this holistically now. I think, the way that people are interacting with our products has probably changed, and as has many other aspects of their lives. And so I think we need to be looking at our product in the larger ecosystem and in the larger, how it fits into their overall world. So, that's one thing that I think companies need to be thinking about in a way that maybe they didn't before. They were maybe only focusing on the context in which someone's interacting with my product right now, but maybe not how it fits into their overall life or their overall habit set and things. And I think that needs to change, because so much of the rest of our world has changed right now. And, another thing that I would say is that empathy building programs, there's sort of the research side of things of, I have a specific question, I'm wanting to get input on, or I need to understand, how this is being perceived. But then there's another kind of realm, which is just empathy, just listening to someone and having a touch point with a consumer or a customer and saying, what does your life look like these days? Like, what are you worried about? What are you thinking about? And then seeing where your product can solve some of those challenges, or how you can adjust your messaging to be sensitive to those things. And I think companies that are not doing that right now run the risk of coming across like they're not in touch with what's happening in the day-to-day life. So I think that's a really big thing. And, to answer the second question of what can we be doing to support our employees, I think the same is true. It's listening to our employees and understanding the social context that they're working in right now. And, I'm a parent of young children, and the back to school time is incredibly stressful for me. And I know it is for many other people. And so just bringing some of that empathy into the workplace as well, to understand how can we be supporting our employees and how has their context changed. Some people are thriving working from home and love it, and some people would die to go back to the office. And so I think there's some empathy that we need to bring into our interactions with our employees as well, to think about what do they need right now that maybe they didn't need 5 or 6 months ago.
Yeah, I think businesses should definitely, I totally agree with what Ashley said. Instead of looking at your existing products and saying, oh, how do I force fit into this new life of our customer? How do I make more new features so that it'll suddenly be relevant? We should be thinking, is there really a need for your product in the user's current scenario? So instead of trying to force fit your product, which may not have a need anymore, you have to rethink and say, my existing pool of customers, their scenario has changed. Now, what are their top tasks? What are their pain points? What are they struggling with? Maybe my product design has to change. Maybe what I provide them as a feature has to change. So I feel like that investment has to happen from understanding the user better, understanding their scenario better. And of course, the second part of the question was emotionally, socially, and mentally. I think this is huge. This is huge. We talk about personas. It's almost like the entire world is one persona at this point, because we're all struggling with the same thing. It's overwhelming. It's taken over our lives, and suddenly there is this one big persona that humanity is affected by, right? So I feel like companies should be investing a lot in providing emotional support and mental health support to their employees. I'm very impressed with what Microsoft did right when this thing started. I mean, the number of emails we had from leadership, asking us to take care of ourselves, asking us to take time off if we needed to, flexible time. If you want to talk to somebody, we are available to talk to you. It was so generous of them to be so sensitive about small things like, oh, your kid's making noise in the other room, and it's okay, I think that's important for leadership to be invested in those little things and say, every single employee in my company, like one of the guys was like, I don't have a table on which I can put my laptop and work. So he was actually sitting in the nook, like on a breakfast stool or something, and typing, and after some time it gets exhausting. So I was very, very impressed with how Microsoft leadership provided so much support to its employees. And I think it's a huge, huge benefit.
Thank you for that, Joyce. And again, as both of you said, and we stated before, understanding people's needs right now, customers, employees, helps us rethink and deliver great experiences. We talked about looking ahead, right? 3 years after we get back to some new normal. And I guess now I'll invert that a little bit and ask, how can we be nimble and provide quick insights that also add value right now to our teams and our companies in a socially distant world? Any thoughts there?
I'm glad you brought that up. Some of the comments I was going to make on the previous question were about agility and flexibility. And I think that is really shifting how we operate within a research context, but also as leaders and managers and peers. So we are at Autodesk, and within my organization, looking at more agile ways to actually engage with customers, not only doing research in different ways, but also how we deliver product and get feedback. So things like micro pilots, where we actually ship software in that is kind of fake, and other ways to get insight, because we don't know that what people say and what people do are going to be as aligned as they once were, to some of Joyce's earlier comments. And so we're having to shift fundamentally and kind of turn the volume up on methodologies that we would have used in certain maybe more innovative greenfield spaces, to things that may be more applicable to existing iterative solutions that we might have done with more traditional research methods. More mixed methodologies and combining things and trying to find ways to do that. I'll also say, personally as a people manager, I also think that the human connection is becoming even more important, and sharing with empathy a little bit more personal things is also mattering. It's mattering not just with my employees, but I see it also with our CEO, who, the best is when there's an all hands for the whole company and his kids playing piano in the background, or, he tells stories about him going to a protest and what that experience was like. And I'm finding a lot of comfort is happening for the employees at our company, and just for myself, in hearing, some personal stories that help us feel like we're not alone. We're all struggling, no matter what job we have, no matter what level we're at.
Hey, Amy, building on that, I love what you said there. And I think there's this element of being willing to have a frank conversation with customers and starting the conversation a little bit differently. The other thing that you called out, Eric, you called out specifically adding value in a socially distant world. In many ways, if you think about it, the population from which insights are desired just expanded well beyond a discrete geography. And, in the past, depending on the type of research, you might go to a dedicated metropolis or something like that. But now we've got geographically disparate, participant populations, greater diversity of perspective and insights. And that's not just in what we're talking about here. If you read what's happening at all the larger companies, and actually certainly small and medium businesses as well, all of a sudden your employee population or potential population just got broader as well. So, I think that that's a critical component of staying connected as well, is that you're able to talk to different types of people in different locations in a more agile way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a little biased on this one, because this is what we help people do most of the time. But it is, Aaron, to your point, I mean, it opens the world up so much. And, if you were researching with methods where, nothing replaces the in-person experience. I think nothing's gonna replace that immersion of really being with someone. But there are so many technologies out there that can help you connect with people around the world, and and in such a high quality way now, to get a good enough sense, of what is going on in their life, and what sort of products are they using, or what times of day are they doing things. And I think this has just been the push that a lot of people have needed to start embracing some of those technologies that, are being harnessed, that maybe were developed for other purposes, and are being harnessed in this way right now.
I think there's even one other dimension that I'm seeing is, as programs are rolling out, not just with our company, where there's more increased access, right? Free online versions of software and that kind of stuff, the entire population of our users is shifting, right? And so fundamentally, there's going to be some changes, and we don't know yet how that's going to play out, right? How much of that is temporary? How much of that will be persistent as part of a new generation of users to our software and our solutions moving forward?
We're seeing the same change.
Thank you all. I think each of you touched on in one way or another one of our primary tools and methods that we've used in customer experience, research, strategy, and insight is observation in context. It's a primary tool to understand people and begin to anticipate their behavior. Of course, mixed methods and triangulating that with other methods as well. I know that you all mentioned it, but are there any creative methods that you or your teams have used remotely to get similar insights to contextual inquiry?
I have one thought that it's less about a tool, but I've been using this for quite some time, many years at Dell, and I think it's very underrated in the field of customer experience, and even absent of this COVID situation, it's important for us as CX professionals to determine how to best use it. It's the concept of using process mining or a systems engineering approach to really think about what's happening at the internal company level. And one thing I've used very successfully and continue to do so at Dell is customer experience insights kind of coming along one chronology line. And then you underscore that with what's happening from a process perspective within the company. And you can often find situations where within one given organization, maybe everything's working well and all the metrics they keep for their scorecards look green and great, but the customer's falling off as they're jumping in between the invisible organizational silos. And so that's something that I think is important for us to consider as CX professionals overall.
Just to follow up there, Erin, I would imagine then that is very much so a cross-functional kind of capacity building, team enablement building activity. Can you elaborate?
It is, but here's kind of the trick. There are very few organizations or functions within the company that are truly considered what I think of as horizontal or end-to-end. There's a lot of people who say we do end-to-end work, but they ultimately are talking about end-to-end within, say, the customer care organization or whatever it might be. And so, yes, you have to bring people along, but if you talk about what you're trying to accomplish, in every conversation with every organization, you can often find that people get overwhelmed with where do they fit in. And so you do have to set that vision and make sure that you're communicating at the right executive level how you're approaching it, the fact that you're going to go from the point the customer is learning about something all the way to the point something is delivered and up and running, whatever the business case might be for your company. But you engage the organization so that they can plug in, but talk to them about their piece. Now, you eventually start to reveal the connection points, but I've found that trying to talk too high level and start something that says, oh, we're going to do this big customer journey, people can get mentally exhausted with it, and they won't put the right ergs into it.
To answer your question, Eric, about sort of the creative ways to think about bridging contextual information, in Autodesk, we've been adopting a Luma design thinking practice over the last few years and sort of rolling that out as design thinking across everybody who's an employee in our company. And that has really saved us right now in a lot of ways, because it's with tools like Mural, if anybody's used that, or any other kind of virtual post-it note kind of software, together we sort of are exercising that muscle of thinking about understanding customers in context and trying to mine that information in ways that create acceleration to innovation or decision making, using Mural and other tools like that to create outcomes and conclusions in a more iterative kind of agile way. And we're using that with our customers. And so we, are moving away from the kind of customer presentations or conversations that might have been even in our sales organization with PowerPoints and that kind of stuff, to something that is much more of a co-creation type of experience. And these virtual tools are really helping us create a different conversation with customers. So we may not be getting the same contextual information, but we're mining their information in a slightly different way now that is still giving us a broader understanding of environment, things around their ecosystem. What does their stakeholder map look like, for example, right? And so we're moving beyond just usability type of testing thinking and into the whole design thinking framework.
Thank you so much. We are almost 20 minutes out, so feel free, any attendees, to begin to enter questions that you may have for the panel into the Q&A option at the bottom of the Zoom interface. Just following on with that, I know Joyce, when we were doing the debrief before today's conversation, we also talked about some creative approaches, unique approaches that you were using as well in your work. Did you want to expound on any of that?
Yeah, so it was not contextual inquiry. That's why I didn't mention it earlier, but I can talk about it now. Yeah, so in terms of, you know, unique approaches that, or tools or approaches that you can use to kind of work around this whole COVID scenario, one of the things I did was I needed to test a few designs, a few prototypes. And normally I would have done a cog walk, some expert evaluation, pulled a bunch of people into a room and, you know, walk them through the designs and, you know, done a cog walk. But at this point it was hard. People were all busy. Just getting people into a Zoom meeting was, just scheduling that with 20 people was super hard. So one of the creative things we did was the designer and I worked on the actual user journey. And, you know, she created the Figma files for it. And then I sent the Figma links to just everybody who was willing to be part of the cog walk. And then we used the comment feature of Figma and used that as a chat board. So instead of having, you know, normally what you would do is sit in a real room and talk to people and interact, and they would say, oh, it doesn't make sense to click here and go there. Now people are going into Figma, looking at the designs screen by screen, and they're actually just clicking and putting a comment there saying, it doesn't make sense to click from here and come there. And then we could go back and put our comments there. And, you know, as we went through the comments, we could go ahead and, you know, change the designs right there on the spot without having to go back and look which comment matched which part of the screen and so on and so forth. And another advantage was that I didn't have to get a whole bunch of people to agree to a certain time on a certain date and for 2 hours. I just told them, hey, you have between now and the 24th or whatever to go through this, just make sure you do it. So we got way more responses. We got way more, you know, good feedback on the designs. And then I was able to kind of send it out and, you know, test it, like do a balanced comparison study and figure out what to do. So I think that's one of the adaptations I did. And I feel like, you know, there is a greater need to reach out and connect with everybody, with all our users. I would say increase the frequency of touch, but at the same time, be cognizant of user fatigue. People are fatigued as it is these days, and user fatigue is real. At the same time, the need to reach out and the need for somebody to reach out to you is also high. So how do you strike the balance between those two, right? I am feeling like somebody needs to reach out and, you know, make sure I'm okay. At the same time, there's like user fatigue, right? Also work with tech that users already have in their home or their workspace environment. Try not to enforce new technology on them to do a particular test. Be creative, don't be afraid to experiment. And some methodologies, you know, they might adapt better than you can imagine. This cog walk using Figma as a chat board worked way better than I had imagined. So I think it's all about just, you know, figuring out what the situation is, what information you're looking for, what questions you want answered from your users, and just going for as many creative options as possible. I mean, I feel like this is a time when we used to talk about creative methodologies. I remember interviewing for usability jobs, and people, the hiring manager would ask things like, what is the most creative usability method you have ever done? Now it's less of a what is the most creative. It's more about, it's an imperative. We have to. We don't have the opportunity to call somebody to a usability lab and do our testing, or like Eric said, do an in-context inquiry, or we don't have the ability to do that, right? So now this whole creative method business is an imperative. We just have to do it, and we just have to be more cognizant of the fact that this is how life is going to be. I mean, it is not going to, like Eric said, it's not going to go back to what we knew life as pre-COVID, right? So yeah.
That's right. Thank you so much, Joyce. And it's almost like you have my list of questions in front of you. And so to that point, everyone's sheltering in place right now. You mentioned being respectful of people's time, but also reaching out in different ways. As research leaders and customer experience leaders, have your teams had to pivot or rethink how they support the changing needs of participants? And can you provide a couple of examples? And then we have some great questions also coming back to a few of the answers, a few of the previous answers.
I can jump in and just say that you know, we've started connecting. And we're a global organization, and so we were already helping people do interviews around the world. But the need for that and the need to connect with audiences that are not in an office building or are, you know, not don't have really high internet, you know, bandwidth and things has forced us to really invest in making that accessible to people. So I think as we're thinking about how to connect with people, it's how do you do this in a way where everybody's working from home and you may not have great internet, and you know, how do you maximize the experience and the conversation in a world where you might have people in the background, or you might not, you know, your internet might cut in and out and things like that. So just being conscious of that has been important for us as we're connecting with our customers, and then helping our customers connect with their customers as well.
I can add, in my team, we've seen our research demand for research, both from recruitment, or if you count it as the number of activities that we do, it's up 86% just from this time last year. Most of that happening in the last quarter due to this growth. I mean, it's tremendous. And so what it's forced us to do is absolutely pivot, not just to virtual communities that we've established, but also it's providing, it creates more pressure for actually research operations and design operations types of jobs. Recruitment, coordination of activities, building and nurturing an online community, making sure that we have stakeholders in the different geographical regions that can handle different local language issues and time zones and all these things. We used to be able to fly to places to bridge some of those challenges. We can't do that anymore. And so it is causing us to not only pivot in the very tactical day-to-day work, but also strategically how we get budget, how we actually advocate and ask for this stuff. We're seeing also an increase in the kind of questions coming in from our businesses around more of, like, in our case, SaaS business types of understanding, like customer satisfaction surveys, and, you know, what's happening with sentiment and how are we measuring that in product. And so what is the health of a business and how does that align to what we need to do for our strategies? So the research team is getting tapped in different ways, and it's forcing us to ask ourselves, do we need more quantitative researcher skills to kind of handle those needs? And so there are some very strategic discussions happening in my org around how short-term or long-term are some of those trends, and trying to see how we can advocate and get ahead of some of that from a strategic point of view.
That's
Hey,
great.
I saw a note in the, Jeremy, if it's okay to jump in, I guess there were a couple questions that came around process mining and wanting me to give examples.
Yeah.
So if it's okay, I'll jump in on that. I'm going to give two simple examples of what I mean by that. And of course, it could go much broader than this, but hopefully at least one of these will resonate with the attendees. So what I mean by that. So one example was we went to do a body of work to understand what our customers experienced from the point of attempting to order a system all the way to the point it was delivered. And we started seeing these things like strange communications happening at wrong times, or the shipment got delivered to a totally different place, things that were really, really disrupted from a customer perspective. So what we did was we took that customer experience journey and built a chronology of what happened and what the customer said happened. Some of it we knew what happened because we could see the emails that were sent. Some of it was their perception. Both are absolutely fine. Then what we did was we went in underneath and kind of worked through and said, what is actually happening behind the scenes? And so, for example, one of the things we discovered was because our customer care order support organization is different than our technical support organization, the customer had been bounced back and forth between the different sort of telemetry systems, and nobody had the full story. So you see a process problem there. There's got to be some connections that have to get built in. The other example I'll give you is in something as simple as a customer needing to self-serve order status information. How do you go get information on where your order is in its journey? Sounds very simple. But when we looked at why we were having customer care calls in whether it was certain regions or about certain topics, we realized that because of just how these systems had been built over time, the processes that were in place, or that were maybe a customer was falling off because it jumped from one organization to another, or we realized that there was actually data missing that might be available in one country but not another country, or it might be available if a customer went through one path versus another path. And so you start to see, okay, well, why are we having, whatever, I'm making up this number, 36% of our customer care calls on where is my order? Well, that's a big chunk. So how do you actually figure that out? And then you go in and you realize, oh, we're missing data here, we're missing data there. So that's what I mean by process mining.
Thank you so much, Erin, for elaborating there and answering that question. We also got a couple of questions around the first question that I was asking the panel. How do you build consensus? How do you build trust with your stakeholders and your team within your organization about investing right now? And specifically, those questions were around valuing customer experience, experience design, research right now, ensuring not only do you have a seat at the table, but you help set the table as well. And then also getting budget and maybe resources, headcount, and getting greenlit right now to kind of go and get closer to customers during this very critical time. Anyone have any thoughts there?
I'm seeing us actually that there is more demand, as I mentioned, and more need. So the same need we have that Joyce and everybody talked about to connect, our business leaders want to connect with customers. So they are desperate to understand what's happening. And so it's just turning the volume way up. But on the how do we get the investment, how do we get the buy-in, what does it mean practically, that all costs money and headcount and resources. And for us, it's about building a muscle that we're having to continue to accelerate to be able to articulate the impact that the work that we do has on the business value. So how can we draw a line between research activities and roadmap evolution or business strategy innovation? And so that is a muscle that doesn't exist naturally, I don't think, in many researchers at the start of their career. And as we're seeing now, we're having to help people grow at an accelerated pace to sort of figure out how to talk in a different way, because I think it's the levels sort of are collapsing down between what's happening on the ground and the connection to customers and the business kind of information. And so I think there's a different level of maybe intimacy being created organizationally that is changing the conversation that research organizations have to have with the businesses.
Yeah, and looks like Jason Chang has asked the same question. He says, from your personal standpoint, are organizations valuing design now, or are you still having to fight for a seat at the table in today's remote work culture? I would say still having to fight for a seat, because if it comes to cutting budget, unfortunately, research gets cut before engineering gets cut, right? So even though research is really required, research and design is really required more these days. So Jason, unfortunately, my personal answer is I still have to fight for a seat at the table.
We're finding people wanting to get more done with the same amount of money, essentially. Needing, budgets are being cut, but they're not being increased to the level of the demand that's increasing. So, I think companies are now looking or ways to get creative with how are they spending that money and how can they connect with someone, you know, in a more cost-effective way, or get the same insights in a more cost-effective way. So we're seeing a lot of people move from kind of a full service model of I'm going to pay you to kind of handhold me through this to, all right, I'll go in and I'll figure this out. I'll bring my own, you know, do my own recruitment, you know, to Amy's point, or, you know, take on some of the work that maybe would have been outsourced previously and save some dollars here and there. So I think there are tons of creative ways, you know, for people who need to connect. You know, even if you don't have access to your own customer list, there are communities online that, you know, would mimic, you know, your general user base. If you're a new product and you don't have a well-established customer base, there are so many creative ways that you can get in front of, you know, your exact customer or you know, a similar, very similar customer. So I think it's going to take a lot of creativity right now, and I don't know that the budgets are going to increase, but I'm hoping that people are just able to make a little bit better use of them.
A word of warning though for leaders, right? And everything, I agree with everything that was said. We have to be careful that our organizations don't turn into what I would call a coin operated model, where all of a sudden it's, oh, you're a service, I can choose to opt in or out. The most successful UX and CX design organizations are those that are embedded within the product development lifecycle and not something that can be seen as an afterthought. So just be cautious of that.
And I would just build and say there's a couple examples that I also think are having an impact for us in sort of getting more investment. One is being more aware of the of speaking the right language. So not only from an impact perspective, but analytics is kind of the thing everybody cares about, but that's still just insight. And so in our world, we bridged research and analytics. I used to run both teams together. As a way to talk about that closing the loop, and also being able to talk to show the iteration in release cycle over release cycle on how the impact's changing, and trying to find ways to actually see if we can measure what that means when it comes to actual business metrics. That's the hardest part, but that's, I think, where a really good use of energy is spent, because right now I don't know that leaders often get it. Right? They understand it from like a usability standpoint, and they understand they have to talk to customers, but they don't understand the strategic value all the time that a research organization can provide. And so we're getting a little creative on thinking about ways to pick up on the things that they're more worried about or more interested in, and try and bridge and tie those things together for them, because we can't expect them to make those connections on their own.
You're absolutely right, Amy. This is so brilliant, because I have started considering PMs and devs as my target users, and I go and I try to analyze them and say, what is your demography? Like, what are your requirements? What are the things you're worried about? And instead of telling them, hey, I can do a heuristic evaluation, or I can do a jobs to be done survey for you, instead of doing that, I'll be like, what are your problems? What are you trying to resolve right now? Oh, I have a bunch of backlog features. I don't know whether I should ship them in the next milestone or not. Oh, okay, let me help you with that, right? So if you put it in their words, so I take their backlog items, I convert them as jobs to be done, or whatever method I want to follow, and then I test it, validate it, bring it back. For them, I'm resolving something that was an issue for them, right? Then it is suddenly very clear. Then I'm speaking their language, and suddenly it's useful stuff for them. So, yeah.
That's right. And thank you. This actually leads me to my next question, and then we'll try to roll in a couple of other attendee questions as well. Amy, Joyce, Ashley, Aaron, everybody has mentioned that teams are now having to use different tools and different capabilities, and learn new competencies around how to use the language of the business, how to use the language of the teams that they support, that they're embedded in. Any other ideas around how this time has allowed for growth of your teams, and what other muscles are your team members flexing to be multipliers of learning opportunities right now? Any additional thoughts?
I can jump in. I mean, for us, we've been a fairly remote company. About half of our workforce was remote prior to the pandemic, and then the rest of us went remote, you know, back in March. And so I think it's really forced us to get creative internally with our communication, but also has put us on, I think, a more level playing field with getting input from different parts of the business on, you know, our roadmap and on where there's customer need and things. So it's allowed for more voices, and I think more equality in the conversation, because it's not, you know, I think despite our best efforts, you know, it was sort of concentrated in, you know, the office environment where, you know, we had a smaller group of people, and a lot of the frontline, you know, users of our platform and customer success and things, we were not hearing from them as much as we are today. So I think that's led to more internal creativity, because we've gotten more of that exposure to what our customers are needing on a day-to-day basis, what they're asking for. And it has shifted, you know, the usage of our product has shifted, and the customer makeup has shifted and things. So those voices have become even more important for us in the last few months than they were previously when we thought we knew our customers.
Well, thank you for that, everyone. Great conversation. A lot of great answers and deep thinking here. Some things for us to, as a community, to chew on and continue to navigate and figure out as we move forward. Jeremy, I'll turn it back over to you. We're 1 minute up for time, but I want to thank all the panelists and all the attendees for attending today. And feel free to reach out to me directly or to any of the panelists if you have further questions.
Yeah, I wanted this to extend for another hour, but I'm sure people have other virtual meetings to attend. So thank you everyone for joining today and for all the great questions. If you enjoyed this one, be on the lookout for our next webinar in the Evolving Experiences series. The next one's actually going to focus on technology leadership. And so we'll be posting the details online and kind of the same channels. As always, we're always looking for feedback as well. So look for those notifications. And again, thank you all, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Everybody. Be safe.
Bye.